Hello and welcome to the FatBoss Guide to the Butcher on Mythic in Highmaul.
That's right, and this encounter has not changed all that much. There's one new mechanic that's been introduced, but you can kind of cheese it entirely, which makes it slightly irrelevant. You still have to deal with it at certain points of the fight, but really this encounter is just a pure gear check. The amount of damage the boss does is far higher, so it's going to test your healers a lot more. And the DPS requirement, because it is a 4-minute enrage, if you include your tanks and your DPS, everyone needs to be doing at least 31k DPS for you to kill the boss before the enrage. That's if you're running with 4 healers. However, that's kind of loose because the boss can technically die in the enrage.
Yeah, because most of the time you end up running around like a nutcase at the end. It's like, okay, boss is about to enrage, everyone's spread out, and hopefully he dies to dots. Like, we did actually have a 2.5k wipe, so you might have a couple of those while you're progressing, but overall, if you have the damage, this boss is a pile of piss.
Now, if you don't know anything about this fight at all on Heroic, click up on the annotations you see on your screen now. It will take you straight to that video. You can learn everything you need to know about the fight on Heroic, because all those mechanics are in play on Mythic. Now, for this encounter, you want to bring 2 tanks, 4 healers, and a mixture of ranged and melee DPS, and always bring your strongest DPS here. If someone's doing 20k DPS, put them on the bench.
Oh, poor them.
They're not going to be doing enough.
So kicking straight off into the new mechanic, because it's the only interesting part of the fight, it's the new ads that spawn called the Night Twisted Cadavers. Now these will spawn at set times throughout the fight around the outside of the boss's like ring area, his little arena. Now what these will do, they will start walking towards the Butcher, and if they come into contact with either the Butcher or the player, they will explode. And this explosion will deal about 150k damage to all players within 8 yards. Their explosion will also leave a little pool of like shit on the floor. If you stand in this, it deals ticking damage to you and also increases the damage you take from the Butcher's Cleave attacks by 100%, and these pools do last forever. So you can kind of imagine if all of these pools get into melee, you're going to have a bad time because you're going to have nowhere to stand and you're going to be taking a shit ton of damage from the Cleave. You'll pretty much be one shot.
So the idea of this fight is that you do have ranged members to soak all the ads so they don't go into melee and fuck over the Cleave ability. And kills have been done that way, that's absolutely fine. However, the way that we do it completely makes these ads almost redundant, and you don't really need to soak many of them at all. On the pool, if you bring the boss towards the sewage area of the encounter room, none of the ads actually spawn in that area, so when they start moving towards the boss, they'll pretty much just be moving in a single line. And if you do it correctly, you can have your 2 melee camps that take the Cleaves to be stacked on the left-hand side of the boss, slightly spread apart, so you know, of course, they're not getting hit by the Cleave, while all of the ads just run into the right-hand side of the boss.
It's pretty much they just funnel in, even though they are spawning at different points around the ring. Because the ring's so far away, they just slowly funnel in and just go to the side of the boss, all explode at the exact same point. And it pretty much makes them redundant. You don't need to do anything with them except let them explode on the boss. Because the boss doesn't get a buff or anything from this. He doesn't get anything. He just sits there and takes it. And it's absolutely fine.
However, during the Bounding Cleave, the ads can become slightly problematic. The mechanic of Bounding Cleave itself hasn't changed. Once the boss hits 100% energy, he'll knock everyone back, and then he'll charge the largest clump of players. Now, when he is moving to the largest clump of players, the ads can actually path slightly differently because they're moving to a different location, because the boss is in a different location. The ads always move towards the boss. Now, this can sometimes fuck over the melee groups because the ad can go towards the boss, and then the boss suddenly moves back towards the tanks, and this can make the ad come from behind the boss rather than to the right-hand side, which means that whenever the Bounding Cleave does come in, you want 1 ranged DPS, which is not soaking the Bounding Cleave ability that happens right at the end of the 3-part sequence, to go and soak one of the ads.
Now, the amount of ads that you actually need to soak at this point will be a little bit, like, it'll vary quite a lot. It can just be one stray ad that decides to be a bastard, or it could be a whole group of ads that decide to be a bastard. And really, you can only really tell if these ads are going to be problematic really through experience. You can kind of just judge, are these ads going to hit the boss before he charges, or are they going to path really horribly because the boss is going to move before they actually hit him. So really, you do want to have that one range person always just on the outskirts, ready to soak if you need it. It's really good if you do have high damage reduction as well, just in case you do need to soak like 1,000,000 ads. If there's only just one stray ad, you don't really need to use a cooldown. It only hits you for 150k, and of course you're not taking any Cleave stacks, so there's no additional damage coming your way. So all you need to do as that player, just soak any of the horrible ads that are going to be coming in, and then the fight should continue as normal.
Now, as for the Bounding Cleave ability itself, there's also ways of making this far easier, because you really want to reduce the amount of players that actually get hit by the Cleave. Now, because it will always charge the largest clump of players, but the actual amount of players it needs to hit is 1 to prevent the entire raid to actually get hit by it, because if the boss doesn't actually hit anyone with his bounding cleave, he'll just put a cleave on everyone.
For 400k.
For 400k, so it insta-kills everyone. You always need 1 person to get hit. However, you can do things so you don't even take any damage from it at all. If you have players stacked up that have like Blink or Displace Beast or Warlock Portal or anything like that, as soon as the boss is about to charge that clump of players, you can have everyone apart from 1 person just to blink out or use the Warlock Portal or Displacer, and the boss will just hit that single person. But it's important that that single person has a massive damage reduction or some form of immunity. As long as the boss casts the ability on that 1 single person, it's perfect. And you want to try and do that for every single bounding cleave you can. Now, this isn't completely necessary, but it just helps the healing, and generally it's a nicer way of doing things. However, you can just have 5 or 6 players stack up and take the cleave instead. That's absolutely fine.
Now, right at the start of the encounter, you do need to get the boss from the middle of his room all the way pretty deep into the sewage area, and this can cause problems because the boss will start doing his cleave attack, and if he is running at the same time, melee might be lagging behind or they might not be in their groups properly. Generally, it's not a good idea just to run straight into the corner and get the boss into positions. So because of this, we actually tank the boss just at the entrance of the sewer, while the range just soak the adds that come in. Once we've had the first bounding cleave, we have a group of range players stack up further into the sewer. So instead of us dragging the boss charges further into the sewer. And from that point, he can be picked up and moved into position for the tanks. This just makes it so much safer, because otherwise you're just going to have cleaves on the wrong people and people are going to die, and it's just bad for DPS as well because there's so much movement involved.
And at this point, the boss no longer moves. He just stays in this single location the entire time.
Now, once you do have him in position, make sure you do have your bounding group set up. If you do want to try and cheese it with a bunch of mages, then go ahead. If not, you're going to have your 5 or 6 people there, and you'll also have your 2 melee groups. Now, one of these will be to the left-hand side of the boss, and one will be behind the boss, and that means all the adds will be coming in from the right-hand side. A good thing to do is actually have the boss positioned slightly to the right-hand side in comparison to like the melee point of view. This will make it so you won't get any parries and stuff like that, because you do have like a limited area around the boss. Parries can become a problem if you're not facing him in the correct direction, so you can do that.
And it's from this point on, you need to literally just keep repeating what you're already doing. You need to make sure that the adds hit the right hand side of the boss. When the boss does the bounding cleave, have someone go soak the adds just to make sure that they definitely don't hit anyone else or come from behind the boss or anything like that. And it's just repeat, and then eventually you'll kill the boss. However, that isn't everything.
We got the cleaves to talk about.
We got the cleaves to talk about. So the cleaves in Mythic difficulty do so much more damage than what they did on Heroic. With a group of 5 players, it will knock them down to around 30% health, 20% health, if they don't have any sort of damage absorb shield or any damage reduction on them. And the cleaves come in every 6 seconds, which means that once someone's taken a cleave, them and their other group needs to be topped up within the next 6 seconds, otherwise potentially they're going to die. Now with the cleave stacks on Mythic, if they reach 4, that group will instantly die. So not 5 or 6, which was on Heroic or Normal. And really, you can actually switch these stacks on 2. However, in the Frenzy, because the boss is casting the cleave so much quicker, you have to swap on 3. We actually just keep it 3 across the entire encounter, but if you wanted to swap on 2 before the Frenzy, feel free to. It will actually make your healers' lives easier. Now, because the cleaves do so much damage, and you do have only 6 seconds to top those people back up to full, you kind of need to use healing cooldowns, but you need to use them very constructively and kind of loosely, because it depends on so many factors, mainly your healing composition. So for me to say exactly when you should use cooldowns is very, very difficult, because of course your composition can be completely different to what ours is. But generally what we try to do is that we don't use any cooldowns at all, and if we are going to use cooldowns, we make sure that they're up in time for the Frenzy, because the Frenzy, the boss is doing 10% more damage, and the cleaves are coming in even quicker. They're coming every 4 seconds, they're doing 10% more damage, so people are dropping to 20% every single one, and you need to top 5 people within 4 seconds. Which means you need to have almost everything up. During the Frenzy, you want people to chain their personal DRs as much as you possibly can, and if you have rogues, get them to save smoke bombs for the bounding cleave, because what can happen is that the boss will cast a cleave, and then literally a second later, he'll then instantly do a bounding cleave, which is AoE on the entire raid. If that group doesn't have any DR, that means you have 1 second to instantly top them almost. I mean, they don't need to be instantly top, but not like half health, because the bounding cleave, you know, does quite a lot of damage itself. So if you don't do that, or if they don't use a healing tonic, then they're going to instantly die, more or less. It's unhealable. So you need to make sure that you have rotations of what CD is being used on each Bounding Cleave in the Frenzy, and you should only ever get 2 Bounding Cleaves in the Frenzy. As soon as the Bounding Cleave damage has gone out in the Frenzy, this is where you want to use your Tranquilities, and this is also where you want to use your Hymns. These aren't really that great at healing the Cleave targets, but if you can make everyone in the entire raid have full health, this will make Smart Heals much stronger on the people that have got the Cleaves, because of course Smart Heals only go on people who are damaged. If the entire raid is topped apart from the people who are taking the Cleave stacks, then the Smart Heals will always go on the Cleave stacks, and that's what you want to try and keep up as much as you possibly can, because it's the worst thing in the world when Circle of Healing or Wild Growth or anything like that goes on targets that are on 99% health and don't have a dot on them. The best healers for this fight, hands down, are definitely Paladins, because Wings just make healing the Cleaves an absolute joke, and of course having 2 beacons up, 1 on each tank, is absolutely amazing. But Discs are also fantastic at healing the Cleaves, because if you do it correctly, if you put shields on the group before they take the first Cleave and you shield them quite early, by the time your weakened soul has ran out, you can also apply it to the 3rd Cleave, which means the only Cleave that realistically needs to be topped in kind of a panic fashion is the damage from the 2nd one. But mainly without going super in depth about this, because like I said, it is so difficult to do when we have no idea what compositions you're using. It changes completely depending on your composition. You need to just make sure that you have all your CDs up and available for the last phase. That includes your damage reduction, so your barriers, your smokes, all your healing output abilities, so your tranks, your healing tides, your amps, everything just to increase your healing. Just make sure that it's up in the last phase and try and chain it for that last part, especially around the Bounding Cleaves. Bounding Cleaves are super, super important, especially for the people who are already taking the Cleave stacks.
So that's pretty much the fight. It is really just about optimizing everything that you're doing. It's such a simple encounter. The mechanics aren't very difficult. It's just because it is such a tight enrage timer, and the healing that you need to do is crazy. So with DPS, you've got to make sure that everything is optimized, that you're doing everything in the exact right time, and the exact same for the healers. But overall, although this strat is cheesy, it's so much easier. Yeah. So it depends if you want to use it or not. If you're not going to use this strat, by the way, then all you do is soak the ads and do it the same way.
Yeah, it just means more healing, and you could argue it's less DPS.
Yeah.
But of course, you need both of those things, so use this strat. It's better.
So thank you very much for watching, guys. If this guide did help you out, then make sure you leave us a like. It helps us out a lot. As well as if you want to see any of our other Mythic Highmaul guides, and click up on the annotations you see on your screen now, and that will take you straight to those videos.
Thanks for watching.
Thank you.